This week's episode of Couch Potatoes Unite! Is sponsored by Found Penny Studio. Found Penny Studio is exclusively fulfilling our Patreon Tier 3 merchandise perk by doing what they do best, creating to celebrate everyday moments like your favorite TV series. Check out Found Penny Studio's creations at foundpennystudio.com and find Couch Potatoes Unite on Patreon at www.patreon.com/couchpotatoesunite.
You say you want to watch a drama. You say you want to watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama. Or you can watch it with your daddy. You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler. So you can come and talk around a water cooler. We're watching all day and all night. Couch Potatoes Unite. Whoa, whoa. Couch Potatoes Unite. Whoa, whoa. Couch Potatoes Unite.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Which is based on a blog of the same name because in this case, our name is all good things. Ooh, ominous. My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like, for at Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU, ! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays, and as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panelists and I live live behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the website or podcast via iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Amazon Music, basically wherever you get your podcasts, to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including but not limited to Stranger Things, iZombie, The Good Place, Game of Thrones, American Horror Story, Grace and Frankie, Mr. Robot, Charmed, Riverdale, Altered Carbon, The Orville, Outlander, Westworld. We've published several episodes in our Looking Back series covering such diverse shows as MASH, Dollhouse, Breaking Bad, Revenge, and Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Plus, new episodes are in the works, including revisits for Doctor Who, Schitt's Creek, Will and Grace, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., The 100, The Crown, Supernatural, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, This Is Us. The Breaking Better series panel will cover the first 2 seasons of Better Call Saul, and the DCTU series panel will reflect upon Season 4 of Black Lightning. We'll be launching new panels covering Big Little Lies, The Good Doctor, Call the Midwife, The Animaniacs, Killing Eve, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, American Gods, Grey's Anatomy, Cobra Kai, Peaky Blinders, and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll travel through time and experience all sorts of identities with Quantum Leap. We'll thank the Golden Girls for being friends. We'll cry Bazinga for Big Bang Theory. We'll dive deep into the fantasy world of the Magicians. We'll navigate the witty political satire of Parks and Recreation, and we'll become psychos for Psych. We'll go where everybody knows your name with Cheers, and we hope you'll be listening when we talk about Frasier. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers, comedy shows, Comic-Cons, and game stores. Plus, we're planning more live appearances and other cool stuff, including in these, whatever these times are. So make sure you like and follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to the website, our YouTube channel, our Apple iTunes channel, our Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. Plus, new for 2021, you can subscribe to us via Patreon. In an effort to get fancier, to upgrade some of our stuff, to build some capacity, Couch Potatoes Unite is on Patreon to provide the opportunity to subscribe for perks, including member-exclusive email and Discord access, bonus content, TV-themed merch, and the ability to join CPU for occasional watch parties, and in so doing, possibly to place priority requests for shows we cover. If any of this sounds like fun to you, head on over to Patreon or download the app and search for our name, Couch Potatoes Unite. Don't forget the exclamation point. In the meantime, if you don't hear your show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we always seek new panelists. So if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of the outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback, not the kind Q gives regarding Mon Capitaine, the crew of the Enterprise, or humanity in general. But if you keep the tricks to a minimum, we'll at least listen to you. Today's panel and I are continuing the biggest Looking Back series we've ever launched by request of one of our panel members and our second most involved panelist, who made such an impassioned speech about this series of series at one of our live Comic-Con events, we were moved to embark upon this now continuing mission of galactic proportions. If you aren't already aware, from time to time, CPU chooses shows of all types, but usually of some fame or notoriety to reminisce about and to consider whether or not they age gracefully, like an android obsessed with the human condition, or don't hold up as well, like an omnipotent alien being obsessed with testing the human condition. As such, this is another chapter of our Looking Back podcast episodes, wherein we review a show that has been gone, either via natural end or cancellation, for some time, and this is but one chapter in a 30-episode or more, let's face it, it's probably more, series, in which we'll explore each individual season of a science fiction universe that comes back without never completely going away, in cycles that have recurred for more than 50 years. Today we offer you episode 11 of this mega series, which will cover the entire Star Trek franchise. In today's 11th episode, we'll be discussing the 7th and final season of The Next Generation. Each new episode in this new CPU podcast franchise will progress through subsequent seasons of all the Star Trek TV series with additional coverage of the films. Furthermore, our panel will be rotating moderation duties. However, your friendly neighborhood chief couch potato and captain of the Starship CPU is not ready to give away the helm just yet, though we're getting real close here. I am moderating today's discussion as I did the entire run of The Next Generation because it's my favorite chapter of the Star Trek franchise, and Chief Couch Potato privilege and all that business and stuff. Also, at various points in this mega series, we'll present top 10 best and bottom 10 worst episode lists around various themes chosen by the moderator in question, which we will be doing tonight in this episode, as we tend to do with our retrospective series. But I must give you the plot summary one last time for Star Trek The Next Generation. So, TNG is an American science fiction television series created by Gene Roddenberry. It originally aired from September 28, 1987 to May 23, 1994 in syndication spanning 178 episodes over the course of 7 seasons. Season 7 aired from September 20th, 1993 to May 23rd, 1994 with a total of 26 episodes. The third series in the Star Trek franchise, it is the second sequel to Star Trek the original series. Set in the 24th century when Earth is part of the United Federation of Planets, it follows the adventures of a Starfleet starship, the USS Enterprise D, and its exploration of the Milky Way galaxy. The Next Generation features a new crew starring Patrick Stewart as Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Jonathan Frakes as Commander William Riker, Brent Spiner as Lieutenant Commander Data, Michael Dorn as Lieutenant Worf, LeVar Burton as Lieutenant Commander Geordi LaForge, Marina Sirtis as Counselor Deanna Troi, Gates McFadden as Dr. Beverly Crusher, and a new Enterprise. The series was broadcast in first-run syndication with dates and times varying among individual television stations. Today, in part 11 of our many multi-part Star Trek series, our modestly sized crew of Enterprise faithful and Trekkers extraordinaire, namely Nick, Sarah, Kyle, and Michael, along with your very involved moderator, will talk about the finer and less fine points of the final season, Season 7 of The Next Generation. Also, because we're discussing the last season of TNG, we'll be presenting our top 10 favorite and bottom 10 least favorite episode lists for the entire series, like any good TV-loving podcast would, or should. With that said, it should be noted that all of our panelists have viewed the entire Next Gen series and may discuss sensitive plot points. So for those of you who have not watched Star Trek The Next Generation, first of all, we'd be happy to beam you aboard, and second, if you plan to do so, listen at your own risk, as there may be major spoilers. Welcome back, panel! How are you?
Good, howdy.
Great.
Living long and prospering.
Well, that's nice to hear, and so happy to have you back, panel, because we're about to get our 7th and final season of TNG on. How's that sound?
Crazy!
Good but sad.
Yeah, it is. It's sad. And we have been doing it for a little over a year, although COVID and other things kind of got in the way. But before we get too far down the trail of discussing our normal discussions of the 7th season of Star Trek The Next Generation, I must remind the listener and all of you on the panel, we don't do the standard CPU character question that changes with each show we do for each individual season of Star Trek that we cover. We kind of start in the first season with a character question that applies to the series in general, and then remind everybody what we chose. And I was so helpful this time that I gave them the character question with the hope that it would jog their memory a little bit quicker. So, panel, remind us, as you have all these previous seasons, who you chose as reflecting your interest in Star Trek The Next Generation.
Hi, I'm Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
I chose William Riker Commander Riker, William T. Riker, because this is my second favorite of the series, and he is second in command. So that's why.
All right. Welcome back, Sarah.
Good to be here.
I'm Nick.
Hi, Nick.
I'm married to panelist Sarah.
That is the reigning truth. That's all I got.
Yeah.
For now.
For now.
Just
Oh.
kidding.
Yikes, twist.
My character has been Picard, because I really just love all things Star Trek. But this is one of my favorite series, which I'll probably say for a lot of the series is that they're all one of my favorites. So, yeah, Picard.
Very helpful. Welcome back, Nick.
And I'm Kyle, the moderator's brother-in-law. Usually my wife is on these, but she's not here today.
Hi, Kyle.
And I was Geordie LaForge because there are characters I love, but it's by far not my favorite Star Trek. As we've said before, my love for the original series is uncompromising. But I do love Next Generation. Just falls a bit short of the more action-y Star Trek I'm used to.
Fair enough. Welcome back, Kyle, my brother-in-law, married to my sister, who doesn't appear on these panels.
Hi, I'm Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Hi. So I was Picard because I love this show very much. It's definitely one of my favorites of the Star Trek oeuvre. And I also had to mix in there a little bit of Counselor Troy because I like the characters and I like the relationships, but also acknowledge that the female characters on the show are... there's the progressiveness could be a little bit better, but it is a product of its time, so I acknowledge that, but also love the characters very much, relationships.
All right. Welcome back, Michael. And, of course, my name is Kylie. I am moderating this particular series as well as participating on this panel generally, and I chose Picard because I love Star Trek The Next Generation. It is my favorite of the Star Treks, uncompromisingly, and I have much to say. And also, I just want to say, if I haven't already said it, although I'm pretty sure I have, that Patrick Stewart is just a mensch. He's just a great actor. He's a great guy in real life, and I just super appreciate his contribution as Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Star Trek The Next Generation. But I love the show so much, and so that's why I'm Picard. And we've gathered all together again because we've been talking now for 6 episodes about each of the individual previous seasons of The Next Generation. We are now on Season 7, the final season. The way it works is we usually talk about general things and then kind of get down into episodes we liked more and episodes we liked least, and then we'll be pivoting to talking about just reflecting back a little bit again on the whole show and our top 10, bottom 10 favorite, least favorite list, which we did for the original series, and then we did a kind of a smaller one for the animated series because there just wasn't as much of that to go around. So, let's talk about it. What about Season 7? What was good? What was not good? What's your general commentary?
One thing I want to say about this season, this, as a fan of Counselor Troy, as I've mentioned many, many, many times on this podcast, I was very happy rewatching this season and noticing that I feel like she got a chance to show off a little bit more of what that character could have been if they had given her full account of writing or whatever throughout the rest of the series. I feel like she had a chance on this season to actually show off as a counselor and psychologist. Like, there are multiple episodes, in fact there's like 2 or 3 right in a row, where she's actually using her counseling, her psychological training to help the story along, and I was just like, that's awesome. And there's tons of episodes that feature her and Beverly talking, maybe not always following the Bechdel test, but still, there's lots of scenes between the two of them that you don't get a lot throughout the rest of the series. So that made me happy.
I would just say that overall with this season, it's pretty mellow. There aren't like a lot of terrible episodes, but there aren't a lot of standouts. Kind of a weird way to go out for a season. Again, it's not terrible. We're nowhere near like some of the worst from seasons 1 and 2, but it's just like they get a little bland or meh.
Yeah, I feel like that's why they bowed out at a good point because I feel like they were already kind of scratching the bottom of their barrel, and they needed something fresh, and yeah.
Yeah. And they have Deep Space Nine going on, and they were apparently was an epic beast to figure out that next Star Trek movie script, which is going on at the same time. I do know the cast was surprised that it was only season 7 because their contracts went for 8 seasons to the 8th season, but I think...
Oh, what do you mean by that? That's weird. I've never heard that before.
I just mean their contracts went to season 8, but they decided to stop so that they can go into movies while Deep Space Nine...
Yeah, Paramount was real in a rush to get that new movie franchise started and off the ground, so they really rushed it. Which Watch Generations, it shows.
I love that movie.
I do too. I actually do like it, but I tend to be a movie apologist, so...
I don't know why I love it so much. I just do.
It feels like one of the episodes to me. It doesn't feel like a big movie.
I will say that if I have some thoughts about the finale, we don't have to talk about the finale right now, but I will say that
soon, Michael.
If we put the two of them together, I almost wish All Good Things had been the first movie, because I feel like that is better than Generations as a movie, but it's not really a movie because, of course, it was just a 2-hour finale. But I don't know, it feels like it could have been like the first film.
I want to agree with that and with Nick and Kyle's observation. I'm going to start with the latter, though. You know, as much as I love The Next Generation, I agree. Season 7 is, especially when you watch it back to back, like we now have the ability to do, it is, mellow's a good word for it. There isn't anything particularly off-putting. It was hard for me to pick worst episodes because I don't think that there were a lot of bad ones. It's just that they didn't have the energy and drive and momentum that you saw in previous seasons, particularly 3, 4, and 5. I really feel like 4 is the apex, and then it just it's like a bell curve with the show a little bit. But a really quality bell curve. It just, by the time you do get to season 7, it is a little bit of they kind of start to recycle things a little bit, I've noticed. Although there are some standouts too, in terms of different things that they tried, but maybe just they didn't execute properly. And then I also agree, no offense to those who love the Generations. I don't love Generations either. I don't hate it, the movie, but All Good Things is a really good series finale. I don't want to meditate on that just yet because I feel like we've got time to do so, and that is the end. But it is a really well-constructed finale. I think after the mellowness and kind of the, nothing riveting up until that point, All Good Things is a really strong note to leave the series on. And it could have been the first movie if they'd have taken that idea, but I think they were just trying to give a nice tie-off to the series. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Well, maybe the last thing, because it is more about Generations than the finale, but they literally said in the writer's room they struggled with which one is which. Like, they kept the Nexus and the Temporal Anomaly. They were working on Generations, but were throwing All Good Things in, and they struggled to differentiate which project they were working on at times. And when everything was done, I think it was Rick Berman who said that All Good Things was the better script and should have been the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can dive more into the season.
Well, to your point about the idea of the season being mellow, I sort of see this as the season almost feels like what a mid-season would be for a longer running TV show. Like a mid-season of like MASH or Law and Order, maybe. Just the idea that, it still feels like they've hit the grind. It still feels like they've found that rhythm, and it still feels like they're in that rhythm with these episodes, where it's just like, yeah, we can do these stories. We could wrap things up, and they kind of try, it seems like, they try and wrap up some storylines, but it just was a workaday season in many ways.
I mean, I think the problem with this season is so many episodes kind of feel standalone because they don't connect to like previous episodes or previous threads with certain villains or races. They're all very like one-off missions.
Yeah.
I'll say
they have that very weird like trio where they deal with everybody's children for a while, and those are back to back to back. And it's like, Wesley, obviously, but like, I don't really need you to wrap up Alexander's life for me. I'm not that invested.
Yeah, and if you look at every episode, it's like the whole theme of this season is family. Because you have like Data and Lore, Picard and his fake son.
Yep.
Almost every single Crusher and her grandma and her weird ghost lover, like, everything is family in this season, which I get what they're going for, but it just isn't, it's not as interesting as other seasons.
And then the penultimate episode before the finale is Ro Laren. Like, I forgot about her. She's a thing now? We're doing this? We know she's not my favorite. I don't mean to be rude. She's very talented. But I think they were trying to tie in Deep Space Nine a ton and then set up the whole Voyager storyline with the Maquis. But it's like, it just was a little bit, like, long. It felt very long to me. I don't know. They didn't do a lot of the ones that I enjoy, which is where everybody's working together to solve a problem. They did a lot of, like, okay, we're going to feature this person now. It's not quite as enjoyable for me, but I had a lot of trouble picking worst because nothing was really bad for me.
There are other episodes that I would have thought and I believe are considered bad episodes, but because there's such wild swings, watching the season more rapidly, I don't mind them because, like, Masks is this ridiculous whatever, but at least it isn't a parent and their child figuring out their life. Like, it isn't Geordi and his mom, or, like, at least they're trying something different, so I enjoy that more.
Plus, that was a Brent Spiner palooza. How many different characters can we get out of Brent in one episode?
A lot of lists, it's considered one of the absolute worst of all Star Trek, just because of Brent Spiner and his multiple overacting cheese.
Okay, but I was reading about that episode, Masks. Do we need to recap what it's about for our listeners in case they don't know what we're talking about?
You can.
Yes, that was a yes. So for anyone that doesn't know, Masks was the episode where they kind of recycle a bit, where they find a probe in space, and it turns out this probe has the remnants of an ancient civilization, like the entire archive of an ancient civilization embedded in it, and they encounter it, and suddenly this probe starts using the replicators on the ship to recreate this ancient civilization on the ship. And so it takes over Data, and Data starts having multiple personalities of various figures from this civilization's mythology. And I was reading that Brent Spiner had very, very little time to prepare for that episode because he had just finished filming another episode that was very involved for him. I want to say possibly To Thine Own Self, I feel like might be. And so he wanted to prepare as an actor does, and he just didn't have enough time to do it. But for the brief amount of time he had to prepare all those characters, I think he did a fabulous job, and I kind of like that episode.
I kind of like that. I know that there are a handful of episodes in this season that people really kind of despise. One is the Ghost Lover one. And
that is the most made fun of one on Instagram. There are so many hilarious memes about that.
And Ye Old Statland on Another Planet and this one. But those ones, I agree with Nick. I don't mind them. I don't hate them at all because it was, at least they were trying for something different. Did it go off as well as it could have? No, maybe not. I think I might have put Masks either in an honorable mention or on a list just because I thought, well, at least it's different. And this one was, aside from a couple of episodes, I had the hardest time of all 7 seasons choosing what was best and what was worst for me.
Yeah, they're just kind of all in the middle for me. I forgot that about this season, too, I guess.
Well, and like I said, when you're watching it back-to-back and in binge format like we're able to do, you see it much more noticeably. Back when Star Trek The Next Generation was actually on, and I'll remind people that I did watch it week to week in kind of an obsessive way because I was a teenager, nerdy teenager. You didn't notice it, you were just very happy and you were looking forward to the next one, and maybe other people didn't. Maybe I was more innocent and wide-eyed because I was younger, but at the time, week to week, when you're not really comparing it back to back like we are now, you probably wouldn't have noticed that. And in many ways, they had announced that this was the last season pretty early on in its airing structure, so everybody knew that it was the last season. There wasn't any doubt about that. So I think there was a lot of just appreciating the fact that we still had some episodes to enjoy before it finally ended, played into it as well. They're all nodding with agreement because I've... They're like, sure, sounds good. Are there any other general observations you have about season 7, unless you want to dive right into what we think could be our best and worst episode lists?
I mean, there are some.
I have a feeling our lists are going to be very different this one. Because like the other ones have some episodes that are like so great, almost every Star Trek fan has to agree on them. This season's kind of like so all over the place in like what would catch people's interests. I think it kind of ties to what Sarah was saying because each one is a character episode, not a group episode. So it's going to be interesting.
If you remove the finale and you took what I have as like my 12 favorite and shook them up, you could really pick almost at random what my favorite 3 are, and then the same thing for the other 12 of my least favorite. Like I could be swayed pretty easily for which ones I really don't like and which ones I do. I mean, my bottom 3, I don't know. There's a couple different ways we can go because I have. Well, maybe we should go into the lists and then round back on anything that isn't
mentioned. Yeah, because we're going to cover a lot of the episodes in the list, I think.
Before we go to the list, though, Michael, because I have a feeling All Good Things is going to crop up on a lot of people's places. Is there something you want to maybe not? Is there something you want to comment on the finale before we get into the list, or do you think you would save it for?
Well, I guess just from the perspective of, I think for a finale of a science fiction series, this episode was kind of a watershed moment in my life because I can distinctly remember watching this episode. It was like a huge event. I was at my dad's house and we watched it all the way through and my dad was recording it. And I'm pretty sure after we watched it through once, we watched it again, like immediately afterwards.
I mean, just knowing what we know about your dad, I would believe that. He liked to watch them over and over, right?
Yeah. I also can't believe, like I was looking back at the timeline, I can't believe that Generations came out literally that same year. It was like, I believe it was the fall of 94 that movie came out, and All Good Things aired in May. So it's like not a very large amount of time. So I just feel like this season was one of the seasons I can remember watching it every week, like you were, Kylie. And so, I don't know, just like this moment in my Star Trek history is a very important watershed moment in the way I connect with Star Trek.
See, here's my thing. I was watching this, by this season I was watching it when I was like 8, and I absolutely hated the finale.
Oh, really?
Because as a kid, I fell in love with Q and his quirkiness and how much they won him over to humanity and how the fun, playful banter. And so as a kid, 8 years old, and he shows up in this episode and he's kind of sinister and judging humanity again, I was so mad at Q. And like in my child brain, like that, I got so mad at this episode. And like I know it's great writing, I know it's great science fiction, but I still can't get past that. I mean, that's just my memory of it.
But he was ordered to do it by the Continuum, and he dragged Picard through time to help him out.
I'm just saying, like, that's how I viewed it as a kid, and that's kind of how my first impressions stick with me. Like,
Kylie, I have a question for you.
Okay.
A 2-part question.
Oh, wow, okay.
Were you, number one, were you sad when you watched this? Like, were you, like, really sad, or...
This
like,
time?
the first time?
Oh, the first time? Yeah, I think I was a little bit sad, for sure, at the age of whatever that was, 14. Just because I knew it was ending. Yeah.
Follow up. Did you go see the movie then in the theater?
I did. I did see Generation.
You did?
I saw all of the Star Trek Next Generation cast movies in the movie theater, pretty much in their opening weekend.
So did I. I mean, I remember seeing the teasers when this show was on, and they were all like, you know, the Next Generation steps up, and like they had these teasers before they even filmed anything for the movie. They were trying to build the hype for Generations, and it was, people were jazzed, were so excited. There really wasn't that big of a sadness for the show ending because it felt like we were getting these characters and bigger and better things.
Which was where I was hesitating on the sadness, because I did feel sad, but Kyle's right. They were already starting to tease the films. Plus, Deep Space Nine was current, and then they were also starting to hint at the fact that they were working on another spin-off sequel, which would eventually become Voyager. So there was so much stuff happening in the Star Trek universe at that point that, and I knew I'd be seeing them again, that I didn't actually meditate on that too much. But I always feel a little twinge of like, it's over again after I've gone through this series just because I love it so much. So
shout out to our friends Margaret and Kenny from Blue Bridge Games. They're actually watching this right now. They're in season 2, and it's Margaret's first time watching it. So she keeps texting me things like about the child. She's like, what's going on with that episode? I'm like, it's okay. Like, and Pulaski and stuff. But it's very interesting to like see it through her eyes. She was so sad when Yar died, and I'm like, Nick, should I tell her? And he's like, don't spoil it.
She literally was like, oh man, I wish we would get more Moriarty.
And I'm like, ooh, it's happening.
You have to wait a couple of seasons, but...
Well, so any other general thoughts about All Good Things?
It's a good finale. It does what you want it to do without forcing things. It gives you a reason to go back and be nostalgic, and it's really nice to have Denise Crosby and Carl Meany back where they would have been without forcing it at all. And it gives the other characters a break, and it helps you immediately know, are we in the past, present, or future? Because there's no Troy. We're in the future because she's dead. Like, it just is. It does a lot of good things. It shows us how far a lot of these characters have come. Worf, Data especially, with his igniting the midnight petroleum. Like, his character has grown, and he has slowly become more human. And you kind of can easily forget that even when binging it, because it's really slow and subtle. So I really appreciated this as a finale for a show. And it gives you what they needed to do because the movies were coming, but this type of show, you want them to keep exploring. You don't want them to all, like, oh, this one's going to here, that one's transferring to that ship. But it still gives you that kind of finality and that moment where Picard joins them for poker. Aww.
You should have done this.
Yeah, I agree, Nick. I mean, I think as finales go, it's very good. I think the fact that it bookends the premiere with Encounter at Farpoint is very good. And yeah, they spend a reasonable amount of time on fan service. For all the people that have stuck with the show until the very end, there are bits and bobs in the entire 2 hours that will kind of give you the feels while still propelling what is this cast and what has been its story forward and giving it a launch pad into its film presence. So I agree. I think it's one of the better series finales that I've seen. Not the best, maybe not even top 10, but for Star Trek and for Star Trek The Next Generation, it does what it's supposed to do and very, very well.
I will say now it's kind of funny going back and watching what the old age makeup, what they thought Patrick Stewart would look like 30 years from now, and then actually seeing him in Picard, what he does look like 30 years from now, and he looks so much better.
Same with Frakes. Frakes looks horrible in All Good Things in the future.
Yeah, I don't know who did that makeup design. Sorry. I'm sure you're a very talented person, but he looks like, this is what he looks like. I told Nick, he looks like the character of Jack Frost from the Santa Claus 3. Like, his hair is, like, frosted and frozen up, and I was like, what is happening? He looks way better than that.
And they did not anticipate his love for pizza.
The future is the future is not written.
I thought Gates looked good.
She looked great. The future is unwritten. Stuff has changed, including the ability to keep your hair and makeup looking fresh.
Yeah, it is interesting to note that the future storyline of the episode All Good Things takes place before Star Trek Picard.
I mean, it never came to be.
Though, I mean, like,
because they never... Well, I guess we don't know, but...
Well, Troy isn't dead.
Troy's not... No, that future is gone.
That
changed.
What I mean is the year in which it takes place is before the year in which Picard takes place.
Also, something they cut that was in earlier drafts of the finale is a fourth timeline that they would check in on, but it was during the Borg battle, Wolf 3-5, whatever.
359.
359, and Picard's Locutus, and he was supposed to come in and help rescue Locutus. I think that would have muddied things up. This is a bit better storytelling. What, Michael?
Is that an alternate timeline or like an actual, like...
No, it was one of the pasts that Picard would wake up into, and then Hugh would have been the one helping with the anomaly.
Yeah. It was good to keep it streamlined to like a past, present, future version.
Yeah.
That got the point across. Anything else you want to say generally, or do you want to just, because we have much to list today, do you want to start into our season 7 lists?
Let's list.
Let's list! Who wants to start with their worst ones?
I can worst it up.
Okay, made it sound like sausage. Let's go!
These 3, I put them all together, and maybe each one might be a little bit better if they weren't all next to each other, but Journey's End, Firstborn, Bloodlines. Journey's End is Crusher, Will Wheaton's last one. Firstborn is Alexander's, and Bloodlines is Picard might have a son. Hey, remember that Ferengi from season 1? Well, he's trying to kill Picard. The thinking is it's so convoluted, even for a sci-fi.
Oh, I have so much to say about those 3 episodes.
Journey's End, I really struggle with. They're trying to do so much with it, and I just don't know if... It definitely doesn't land for me, and I'm trying to, this last time, take an outsider's look at it with fresh eyes, and I just don't know if, like, how they tell this story with the Native Americans getting removed from their land again. I don't know. And then the Wesley thing with it just didn't feel good, like when the Traveler's like, oh, these people, they might kill each other, but you don't need to worry about that. You're better than them. Come with me.
Yeah, so you'll be happy to know that I neither honorably mentioned nor bested the one last Wesley Crusher episode. I didn't put it on my worst. However, I briefly contemplated it because of the writing in the episode. It is very messy. It abruptly turns into, oh, you're evolving now. This is something they didn't even bother with since season 1, but now it's like, okay, you're evolved now. But set against the backdrop of, yes, indigenous peoples and Cardassians coming to claim what they think is their planet and all that business. It's too messy for that departure.
I mean, you're a resident, like, Wesley fan.
I am.
But don't you think he deserved a better? I just think it just wasn't good. I don't know.
Especially when we learn about another, in this season even, we learn about another character that went through what he went through at the academy, and he just seems like a whiny little brat. Like, they did not do him, I think they did the character a disservice in that episode.
Beto Jax is the character you're referring to.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that episode features in my honorable mentions because that one's pretty good. But you're absolutely right. You're all right. It's not a very well done episode. I don't pin it on Will Wheaton in any way, shape, or form. I think they were trying to give him a send off, but it becomes kind of a circular screw that they keep applying to him because we could talk about Star Trek Insurrection at some point, or whenever, maybe it's Nemesis, whenever Troy and Riker get married. Whatever.
That's Nemesis.
Nemesis.
Okay. Will Wheaton was supposed to be in that scene, and he was left on the cutting room floor, except
You
for
can still see his head behind another person's head.
Exactly, which is almost worse, because people saw him, and he wasn't in the movie, and it all comes down to, I think, an enmity that he had with Rick Berman over the way things kind of transmorphed with his departure from the franchise for a time, and also just, how he kept reappearing and what they did with him on this series. But no, you're absolutely right. It is a messy, not well-written episode where there's a lot of plot threads that don't seem to match and aren't tied off properly, really, except for the fact that you know that Wesley's gone to another plane of existence, whatever that means. Why can't Q help him with that? That seems like a Q problem to me, but that's okay. And it's something they set up very, very well in season 1, but then they just completely forgot about it because everybody was mad that Wesley was saving the ship so much.
I know it's nice to have Beverly and Will have this moment, because it should be on them, but it is a funny little offhanded line. The Traveler told Captain Picard this about you, and he wasn't supposed to tell me, but at some point he did.
Maybe when they were connected, she just read it.
Oh yeah, that's what they should have said when I read his mind.
Well, they should have hired 14-year-old me to help write. Because back in the day, that's how old I was when it was aired. So.
Yeah, it was very ham-fisted, this one, unfortunately. And may not be even, like, it's probably one of the worst for him in the series, which is sad, but...
Yeah, he just deserves better, I think. I think he deserves better. I think Ro Laren got a better send-off than he did.
Yes,
so.
That's true.
I think...
Yeah, but Ro's probably dead.
Yes, that's true.
Well, I mean, okay, so he deserves a better send-off than Alexander. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and even though it's in my bottom 3, and again, it's not the worst Alexander episode.
No, that's the one.
And you technically have 2 Alexanders in it.
And technically, it's not really a send-off for Alexander. It's really just a send-off for actor Brian Bonsell, who played him. Because maybe, spoiler alert, we might see Alexander later on in a certain series we might be covering.
Is it not played
Unfortunately.
No, there's like an age jump, so they get a new actor. And they still don't know how to write for the character.
I didn't have any of these in my worst, but I understand why you did. So...
Well, I can say my list next, but I will just say that, like, I don't feel super passionate about this list, because I just feel like it's whatever. Well, okay.
We're so milquetoast this time.
So mine is, there's 4, because my second place, like, I hate them less than the other one, is Journey's End, Bloodlines, and Firstborn. But my most disliked is Sub Rosa, where Beverly has ghost intercourse with her great-grandmother's ex-boyfriend. I just think he makes a lot of choices that
It was a candle.
I would not be making. Yes, it's a candle.
Star Trek trying to be a gothic romance is what they were going for. They wanted to tell a gothic romance story in space.
And the biggest belly flop of the show.
I don't know about that, but it's probably not,
On all the lists I've read, it's the second worst episode of Star Trek.
I didn't put it in any of my worst lists because it's so cheese-tastic that I just think to myself, and how many episodes does Beverly actually get? And it has some Scotland-esque to it. It's kind of... I don't know.
Space Scotland.
It's Space Scotland. It's Outlander before Outlander became a thing.
I don't ever need to see it again. I cringe because she is an educated, beautiful lady, and...
Look, that ghost is powerful, Sarah. That ghost is powerful, and she got seduced. It was seduced. Seduction.
I just generally don't think... You should... I can't. I don't... I'll keep it PG. I was going to say, I don't think you should put your stuff where your great-grandmother's stuff has been. I just don't. I'm against it. I'm sorry.
Not just the great-grandmother. Her grandmother, her great-grandmother, her great-great-grandmother.
Oh, the green-eyed Howard women.
Yeah, it's a lot for me to handle, and that is why I put it. So, there you go. That's my list.
My list is pretty similar. Journey's End, Wesley Crusher, obviously. My dislike of that character is well documented.
Like Sheldon Cooper.
I mean, I probably only would have been satisfied if he was a red coat, and that's how he ended his tenure.
A red coat? What's that?
Red shirt, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm like, ooh, is there like an...
They should have just had him go on a mission and just get killed. I mean, evolving into another state to explore it's so ridiculous. I would have been better if they gave him a tragic death saving everybody or something.
I don't agree with that.
I mean, come on, he disappeared and then he didn't even get to show up in any of the movies.
I agree with that!
I would have rather they took that character and did something with him.
I agree, yes.
Or did nothing. They could have done nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, don't bring him back, have him just be off living his life, but what they did with him was so ridiculous, it was worse than nothing, like she said. Bloodlines, I hate Ferengis to begin with, and then the whole story with his estranged son, who's not really his son. So, like, by the end, there's no stakes in the episode, and it feels similar to Kirk finding out he has an estranged son, but then it also feels like Nemesis, where he has a clone who's kind of like an estranged son, which all these are the worst Picard storylines you can get. And then number one is Sub Rosa, because I feel like there's really good Crusher episodes, like the one where she and Picard are linked, and even the episode that Gates McFadden directed which is kind of horror movie-esque, I love. So it's such a high season for her, and then to have this ridiculous soapy episode, it did the character. I can't stand it. I skip over it, so I never watch it other than the time I first watched it, and I never plan on watching it again.
I can't fight for it.
You hear that, patrons? If you pay enough, we can make Kyle watch something.
It'll just be me going, oh God, why?
That'll be bonus content for some month.
I feel like I would have to watch it with him since I also said I'm never watching it again. So Kyle, we'll do a live air here.
And I'll gladly watch it with both of you.
Yeah.
Honestly, we need to. This is like a really great idea. We should just watch it live, and it should be like a live commentary.
We could do a watch party.
Get a couple drinks and everybody.
We can wait till August, September, October.
Okay, so that was Kyle's worst list. He expounded on his hate for the Wesley and the ghost lover thing and stuff.
I didn't really say I hated Wesley. I did, but I just meant, he should have passed away doing something heroic.
Yes, okay. You did, and then you did say that too.
I'm just kidding. I hate Wesley Crusher.
Yes, exactly. We know. Michael, did you want to go over your worst list?
Yes, I will gladly go over my worst list. Okay, so my bottom three, I agree with Kylie. I had a hard time with this. It just felt like, to me, again, the 7th season is, I think, a good workaday season. So it's a lot of decent episodes, fun to watch week after week when when you're actually not binging. I remember that, just being like, tuning in, being like, yeah, cool, it's TNG time. But anyway, my bottom three, my number 3 least favorite, meaning it's not like Sarah, not the worst, I think, is Force of Nature. Force of Nature is the one for our listeners. It's the episode where they...
Climate change.
Yes, exactly. They meet a couple of aliens who are scientists, and they have this theory that warp speed travel is deteriorating space and is damaging to the universe's health. And they don't have any proof of this. They just have a really, really good idea that this is what's happening. So the female scientist, because of course it's the woman that has to die, ends up sacrificing herself in order to prove her theory right. She ends up being right, and that's when they implement the warp speed limit that gets mentioned a couple times later in the season and never mentioned again. It's so funny, this episode. It's clearly a capital M message episode. They were like, it's the early 90s, it's 93, 94. We've heard this thing called global warming, and this... I do find it interesting. One thing I like interesting about this episode, they say the words in the episode at the very end when they're wrapping everything up, and the male scientist is explaining the point and putting a period on it really blatantly. He even uses the words, the climate is changing. It was interesting because I remember in 94, climate change wasn't the go-to term. It was global warming. And that's what everyone thought of, as like, oh, we gotta protect the environment because global warming's gonna happen. People didn't really use climate change, which I thought was interesting. But it's the capital M message episode, and Star Trek doesn't do that well. It's better when they do subtle science fiction points, when they're trying to make a point about a real world issue. When they do it blatantly, like this episode, and oh wait, I just remember there was an episode in the first season, I can't remember what that one was. It was the drug episode. But anyway, I just remember there's that moment in that episode where Tasha Yar is explaining again the message of the episode, and the camera just literally pushes in on her as she's, explaining the point. I feel like this episode did that exact same thing. So that's my number 3. Number 2 is the episode Interface, which is the episode where Geordi LaForge discovers that he can use his visor to pilot a drone so that he can see what this drone sees, and they're like, oh hey, this is cool technology. But then he finds out his mom, unfortunately, was in a crash, and he doesn't really deal with it in the episode, and literally every time I watch this episode I fall asleep and I have no idea to this day what happens in the end. So I don't know. Does she survive? I can't remember because I've literally never seen the ending.
No, she's dead.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
So does he deal with it? Because I don't remember.
He deals with it because an alien takes her form because of the interface. It can kind of read his thoughts somewhat, but it doesn't do a great job of being his mom. Sounds like a little robot. I don't know. It's not great.
I feel like by the way you're trailing off, Nick, that is a good point of, this episode's not that great. And, and it's just like, if I'm falling asleep during this episode, literally every time I watch it, that's a good indication to me that I should never watch this episode again. And my number one, like everyone else, is Journey's End. This episode may, spoiler alert, feature in my bottom 10, because, let's face it, Star Trek has a terrible history with Indigenous people stories. There are a couple episodes in the original series. There's a couple episodes.
Hey, he became one of the tribe. It was very, very emotional episode in the original series.
We're talking about Kirk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He got married. He had a family. When Picard does it in some fake little computer world, everyone loves that. When Kirk does it,
I don't think everyone loves it when Picard does it. This is just shenanigans.
although Picard at least got a flute out of it, Kirk got none.
That wasn't an indigenous culture.
They were indigenous to that planet.
Yeah, they were indigenous to the planet.
Hey, Michael, but what about during Voyager? We got Chakotay up in there. Come on now.
You know what? I'm going to have to wait on that because it's been a while since I've seen Voyager, and I remember a lot of what they do. Okay, here's another reason why I hate this episode, The Journey's End. Why the heck do they not just pick a tribe? I think there's tribe, and it could have been a very specific. They could have used that culture's, iconography, and I looked up whether or not the term they use for I don't even know what Wesley does in that episode where he sees the vision. They use a term for it, and I looked it up, and I'm pretty sure they made it up, which just seems so wrong to me.
I think it's a little hard, too, to have to watch Picard trying to move these people when he clearly doesn't want to, and they've already suffered so much, and now they're being persecuted again. But we see why, because we have to have this treaty and whatever, but it's like an impossible situation. It's just not fun to watch. And you don't like anybody or anything that's happening, and it's really just, it's hard.
I also think it takes you out of the world. If Earth is a utopia, we didn't solve this problem yet. It makes me depressed for whatever the good version of us in fiction will eventually do.
That you just mentioned, Sarah, which is the premise of the episode. In and of itself, that sounds like a really good science fiction episode. It sounds like a good episode of Star Trek, but they botch it horribly.
They also did that with the Shellyak. The Shellyak got a planet that, oh no, people are on it. We have to move them. They won't move. And then Data has to destroy their entire encampment so that they choose to live.
Right. So in that sense, it's recycling something they've already done better.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make a defense of the episode, but I guess I don't understand the point. Why didn't they just pick a tribe or a nation? Because I think they were going for a larger capital M message about colonization, and I also feel like if they did try to pick one culture out of the many indigenous cultures and use the iconography and everything else, given the fact that they're not very artful about it, given the fact that I think they deliberately made some stuff up so that they wouldn't get into a place where they would be openly and immediately offensive to any just one tribe or nation. I mean, the allegory in this episode is the only thing that is probably carried off well, which is here we have an indigenous culture that has found a place to settle, has claimed their land, sees spiritual significance from the Creator. They use very broad words from indigenous cultures, generally speaking, and now another race is coming to take it over, not to mention the fact that they're being told by a government to which they do not answer that they must leave that home. that piece of it is probably the most successful piece of the Journey's End storytelling in terms of what they were trying to convey. Did they do it well? No, I agree with that. Did they match it up to the Wesley Crusher piece? No, they did not do well there. But I don't know that I agree with I actually think it would have been worse if they tried to pick one. You know, if they...
Well, and you also have to remember how they produced these. They only had a week per episode, and so like when they're filming one episode, they're writing they're just getting the script for the next episode. And when they were doing it with the movie, it was even more rushed. So I just don't even think they just did broad strokes because they just didn't have time to do that kind of research and to put that into it. They were just kind of like chug it along.
I mean, at the very least, it seems they used indigenous peoples to fill the cast members, so that was something, but I don't know that, yeah. There's a lot of things wrong with this episode. For me, that's one of its least issues, really.
I mean, I'm not very good at talking, so I feel like I might have to apologize for that, because I hope that's not offensive to anyone listening when I say that, because that wasn't my intent. I meant, like, to me, again, I'm white, so I have no idea about what the representation of indigenous people are like in a TV show is like and how it affects you or not. But it seems, I would have thought, thinking that being more specific and actually using the real history and the real being specific and being true to the culture would be better than just being general and making stuff up, because that feels like appropriation, but I'm not sure. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
So I'm gonna use I'm not apologizing for any decisions that were made. However, this is 1993-94. This is exactly 3 or 4 years after Dances with Wolves was made, and that was considered landmark for how it treated indigenous, the story of indigenous anything, but it was still told through a white savior's perspective. However, notice the words that we're using, that's all today's context, not back then.
True.
Okay, so it may not, I will agree that this episode, again, is a bunch of problems, and it may not have aged well in terms of its talk about race and its allegory on colonization when it comes to indigenous peoples and how their lands are taken from them and culture is appropriated and everything else. But at the time, I think Kyle's observation is right. It was rushed, and that's basically what we got. I think there are larger problems with the episode, but I don't think you have to apologize for it. I just think it still comes back to, we've had this conversation throughout this series. We're looking at things that were made decades in the past through today's eyes, and so that's part of our measurement stick. Do they really hold up? And it just sounds like that this one doesn't, if it ever did.
I think their intentions were in the right place. It just, the execution, the time, the other two aspects of the story that just didn't blend well makes it not a great episode of TV.
Well, I guess one thing I need to learn more about human rights issues, and I also need to learn more about, because you, Kylie, I know you have a background in that, so I always look to you about these issues because you have the background in it and you know about these things. So, I mean, your opinion about these things is always incredibly helpful to me in my understanding of the world. So, I guess when I say apologize, I didn't want to come off as like, oh, maybe I need to rethink the way I was thinking about that. So that's all I'm saying.
I think you're just fine. I think we've talked about the Journey's End as much as we can talk about it. Was that
Thus ends our journey discussing Journey's End.
Yes, because it's not on my list, and I'm kind of thankful for that. Were there any other worst episodes in your worst episode list, Michael?
Oh, those are the bottom 3. I will say that at Bloodlines, the Picard episode, it's not terrible in my book, so I guess it's more of a dishonorable mention on the fact that I just hate the fact they wrap everything up by literally Picard beaming over to the ship and just saying, oh, by the way, you're not my son. Anyway, here's Wonderwall, or whatever. No, the terrible joke, I'm sorry. Anyway, and I like Firstborn, because I like Alexander, but that's just me.
Well, I can safely say that only one of mine is in common with anybody else, and that was with Michael's, actually. I did not include the Bloodlines, the Sub Rosa, the Firstborn, the Journey's End, and all the other ones that people seem to hone in on, and that's very weird to me because I usually find at least one of those. But I think in my head they all seemed very similar. They were all character goodbyes, and I didn't necessarily think, except for Sub Rosa, they didn't They didn't strike me as the worst, but then these don't necessarily strike me as the worst. They're just the ones I like the least from a story perspective. And I put that preface out there because I think the one I don't like the worst is going to provoke lots of disagreement, at least from one corner of my screen. So my third to least worst, or the best of the worst, or the one I like the most of the worst, is Force of Nature. It's in the exact same spot. Not only is it incredibly hammy and on the nose, it's incredibly boring. I stopped and started that episode at least 6 times going through it this time, and it took me probably 2 days to watch the whole hour because I just thought, man, this is incredibly boring. The 2 scientists are incredibly vocal over very little on which they're basing what they're saying, and then it just spawns this we can't go higher than warp 2 scenario, which is incredibly tedious for the rest of the time. And yes, it's supposed to be a, as we call it now, climate change allegory. It was very obvious then, it's obvious now. Just not artful in the many not artful things that we're kind of discovering upon our rewatch of this series. My second, the one in number 2 spot of worst, is Homeward, which is Worf's brother and his blatant breaking of the Prime Directive by trying to save a people that is doomed to become extinct because of the climate change on their own planet. And he concocts this elaborate scheme to move them onto the holodeck. Oh, by the way, he's married and impregnated one of them, which is why he's so invested. But the guy is Paul Sorvino, who's playing this man. It's like a fairly substantial guest star, and it just felt like, man, this was a 13th hour drop in, and then it's all about the Prime Directive. And then then we
get the same story in Insurrection.
Pretty much. Yep, it is basically Insurrection subprime, and it didn't go over well in Insurrection either while we're talking about it. Can't wait to talk about it.
And then he's deceitful to them, and he uses them and their holodeck, and at that point, what are they supposed to say? No, put them back, let them die. It's
real, it's cringy, and I know everybody had cringiness about some of these other episodes, but I had a really, really hard time with that one. I don't like it very much. It's hard for me to suspend disbelief on Worf and his brother, and why didn't we meet him before? Like, all of a sudden he has this other brother who's not Kern. Like, I was just along with Kern. Well, I didn't need to know about this guy. And then, all that stuff. So that's why it lands. It's just so... I wrote in my notes, this one just came out so out of left field, and I remember thinking that when I was a kid, and I still think that. And then finally... the one I don't like, and it's not because I think it's poorly written, and it's not because I think it's poorly directed, it's because I don't like horror in my Star Trek. And that brings us to Genesis. Also, sorry.
I don't remember what that is, so you'll have to tell us.
This is when Barclay has some sort of weird flu and Crusher makes up this nice little medicine for him that then de-evolves the entire ship.
Aspinall. He goes like a mer person. Kind of.
Worf is scary as hell in that episode.
Did you see that movie, The Shape of Water, and that creature?
A long time ago.
Oh no, that's not. Is that M. Night Shyamalan? No.
No, it's not. It's Guillermo del Toro.
Right. Good job. Okay. Yeah, so at the time, when I first watched this episode as a kid, I was like, whoa, I don't even understand how this happened, and I don't like what I'm watching. That same attitude translated into now. It was really hard for me to believe that Crusher's magic cure had such a profound effect that was also so easily reversed. This was my problem with it.
But you didn't have a problem with masks where the entire ship turns into an ancient stone temple?
At least it didn't affect the people, which seems like a harder fix.
Just wait for Tom Paris and Janeway to evolve.
What? We're not there.
That's weird.
For our Voyager series, which Sarah will be moderating later on in this. I'm sorry.
But I appreciate the reference, though.
Yeah.
This one is such a... It's a swing, and I think it's a home run.
So do I. I think the direction and the makeup in it are excellent. Like, the way they kind of keep them in the shadows so you don't really see it full on. Your imagination kind of fills it in and makes it scarier than this kind of low budget
that we're used to seeing. Did I not predict that this would happen? I said it, and I'm right. God. I'm sorry. It was very traumatizing for me to watch this the first time. It hasn't gotten better.
It accomplished what it's trying to do.
Okay.
Is effective.
Great. That doesn't mean I have to like it. Sorry.
So this one, I really enjoy.
I know. Because
this
you
one,
also like horror, like Kyle.
So it's directed by Gates.
Yes, I know.
Who is on record as saying she was the only cast member with directing experience and they never would give her the chance to direct. They kept passing to give LeVar and Frank, and then they finally were like, oh crap, she's the only one who has experience with this kind of choreography, with these kind of prosthetics, with her work with the Henson Company, and they basically were like, you're the only one who can do this one. They finally let her direct one, even though the character has that dumb moment of, this looks like some sort of venom sac, open your mouth. Like that wasn't a great moment for Dr. Crusher.
That was better than the ghost love, though.
I knew that people would not agree with. I knew when I put it down that people would not agree with me on this panel.
I also have to say, when you look at the whole series, man, this one, they told a different type of story.
But it's not one that this is purely a personal preference to the story kind of thing. This is, I will now attempt to emulate my good friend Sarah and just say, I don't need it. I don't want that in my life. I don't need to see it again. So, that's how I feel.
Man, how are you going to get through season 13 of American Horror Story, Genesis?
Well, you know what?
How are you going to get through The Boys?
Well, I don't know yet about The Boys. What I will say...
You're going to be traumatized.
What I will remind you is that every season of American Horror Story, there are at least two of us, both of which are on this panel, who says, why are we still watching it? I don't know.
I'm the other person. I don't...
So I'm fully self-aware. If Hillary was here, she would tell you this is the case. Okay? It was, look, when I was 14, it traumatized me. Did Gates do a great job? Sure. Are there a bunch of lizard people? Yes. How did they get changed back so fast? That's my question, people. Answer that, and maybe I'll like it better.
I used
Science.
Poor Alyssa Ogawa's baby.
Yeah.
And then, in All Good Things, she, loses that baby. But then, does that happen? Who knows?
I think that...
They never resolved it for me, so...
I think that timeline was fine, and she still has her baby.
I hope so. She deserves better.
Anyway, I knew it would be disagreed with, and probably Star Trek fans the world over, if they're listening, are tweet at us, CPU Podcast. Do you think that I am nuts for disliking Genesis, Star Trek season, or Next Generation season 7? Go ahead. Let me have it. I can take it. That's my worst list.
I love it. I don't hate it.
No, not you.
I know. I'm just trying to help you feel better about yourself.
Thanks.
We are all entitled to our opinion.
That's right.
I mean, hey, I'm the one who said I didn't like the finale. So I get it. I get having an opinion that's different based on nostalgia and the way you remember seeing it.
Yeah. I still feel it's the same.
Let's do our best lists.
Yeah, speaking of, that's a great segue. Who liked what the best? We always have such fun on the Star Trek panel.
This one's real tough, so I'm going to throw off some honorable mentions first real quick. My first honorable mention is Attacked.
It's attached.
What?
You said attached.
Oh, we didn't hear you.
It went out.
The looks on your face was like the looks Kyle and I gave Kylie when she said Genesis was on her bottom.
There was a little bit of that for me, because I have that ranked very high.
Attached is one of my honorable mentions. Sometimes with Troy and Crusher, we take what we can get because we don't get a lot of episodes with them where they feature them, but this isn't one of those. This is we get a good episode with Crusher. And again, they really didn't like women on this cast in some part of the production. One of the reasons Gates was gone after season 1 was because she was fighting for more to do more. And they didn't like that, so they got rid of her. But then they got her back. It wasn't until Jerry Taylor started helping fight those fights for Troy and Crusher. Literally, the only reason, like, you'll see little things of Crusher growing spores in, like, the episode Clues is to help round out the character, because Gates was fighting for that, and Jerry Taylor finally. She literally had to be like, can the character playing my son actually come to me for advice instead of all the other men on the show? Like, she had to fight for those moments. I think Attached is just finally a really good episode where you learn more about Crusher. They play so well off each other, the two actors. It's very enjoyable. And this is one of those moments where I feel real relatable with Beverly when Picard hears all the things she thinks, but tells her brain, oh, you probably shouldn't say that. That'd just be mean. It took me a long time to not say every single joke I thought, because it's not a joke if it's not. It's only funny to me. So I really like the tech. Genesis is another honorable mention. Dark Page is an honorable mention because it really gives, Loxana's last episode really gives her something different to do than just be absurd and ridiculous. And everyone has a sibling we didn't know about. But this one, I think they actually tell that story better.
And we get Kirsten Dunst. Hello.
True.
Pre-interview with a vampire.
Mm-hmm. Then maybe this is my number 3, and then I'll have a tie for 2. My number 3 is Lower Decks. I liked watching. That's where we focus more on that character I mentioned from First Duty, who was at the Starfleet with Wesley, and then some of the other characters that are not the officers, not senior staff, including Nurse Ogawa, which it was nice to see that character fleshed out a little bit more. So I really like Lower Decks. And then tied for my second favorite episode is Emergence, Phantasms, and Parallels.
I don't ever want to hear any more guff when I give my big list.
Well, this is the last season of this show. I'm going all out.
I see.
Emergence is where the Enterprise becomes sentient for a little bit. It's like our last holodeck episode. It's just fun for me. I don't know. Same thing with Phantasms, where the little Data tries to kill Troy because they're in a waking dream state, sees the little mouth sucking whatever from the cam's time. And then Parallels. I really, really like Parallels. Parallels is where Worf is going to parallel universes. But now that I'm saying it out loud, reminds me a lot of the finale. Which is my number 1, all good things. And we've already discussed that, so I'm done with my top 3 favorite episodes.
Top 3. I never want to hear it again.
I can do mine because they're kind of similar. I gave honorable mentions to Dark Page and Thine Own Self, which I don't remember what that is, so jump in, someone who knows.
Thine Own Self is the episode where it's 2 separate stories that Data crash lands on a planet where he's trying to recover a radioactive metal that was, I don't know, came from a ship or something. And he crashes lands on this planet and loses his memory, and it's like a Renaissance pre-warp society. So he has to blend in, being an android and being a very advanced scientific mind. So there's that, but at the same time, it's also the episode where Deanna Troi decides she wants to become a commander, and she takes the commander test, and how she struggles with that.
Yes, thank you. And that is why, because I like that. I like her trying to become a commander because of that episode in last season where she was, like, in charge and was like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I also liked that Data didn't remember. He didn't have a memory. And so I just thought that was interesting to watch because he's always so knowledgeable and in control. And what happens when he's damaged. And so that was good. My number 3 is Parallels, or Worf is time jumping. That's Worf time jumping. My number 2 is Attached. I think it's just a brilliantly written episode. That's where Crusher and Picard are supposed to be helping with the civilization. There's like two different peoples on the planet, and the one peoples want to join, but they're kidnapped by the other people, but then they get escape, but they were like, their brains were connected by a device. I'm not really making it sound good, but there's so much tension, and we hear so much about their feelings for each other, and I just love that stuff. I eat that up with a spoon because I feel like they are Inzadi or whatever that word is. Can I say that? Am I allowed? I don't care.
Sure, but except one of them's not Betazoid, but okay. That's all Beta said.
Whatever. I think
they are reading each other's minds.
Yeah.
Through science,
so, but I mean, how
genetic things.
How vulnerable would you feel if you were like, I don't know. I think it's good. And my number 1 is All Good Things, ... So
there you go.
We're all going to talk about that, I'm sure, at some point. Unless you want me to say why I like it. I
thought we already talked about it.
You can say whatever you want. Feelings are valid.
I just really think it's a very well-crafted finale. Now, granted, it's a double episode, so they had a lot of time to do it. But I think that they did a really good job of this disease that Picard has, which can make him be a doddering old man, but he's not. He's in sound mind, but they don't know. And him having to really reach out to some friends. And I don't know. I just think it's very special, and I enjoy it. Yeah, those are mine. Yay.
I'll go next since my list is pretty similar to Sarah and Nick's. Number 3 is Attached. I just loved interactions between Picard and Crusher, and with the history we have, it's kind of amazing that it took until the 7th season to get an episode like this, but it was worth it. They just play off each other so good, and I love that episode. I could rewatch that one 1,000,000 times. Number 2 is Genesis. I'm a sucker for great makeup effects and how it's filmed and everything. It's a great homage to horror movies, and it works. And even now, after not seeing it since I was 8, and I loved it then, and I felt like it still holds up, and it's still creepy. And then number 1 is Parallels. I love the character of Worf, and this is my favorite Worf episode. We get him winning a ballot tournament, and him being unhappy about his birthday. But then the clever ways they differentiate all these little parallel worlds that are branching off, I think is just brilliant on the writer's part, especially since we know how quickly they had to make these episodes. And the way they differentiate them, and the really desperate Riker, and it's a really fun episode, and I can watch this one 1,000,000 times. I like that it kind of fits with, when you think about, the Star Trek 2009, how you change something and it branches off into a parallel world. So it kind of fits with the physics of Star Trek. And yeah, I just love it. I love that. It's my absolute favorite Worf episode.
All right, my not bottom 3. I almost said bottom 3. Sorry. My top 3. You've all mentioned a lot of episodes that I would put on an honorable mention list. I like Attached very much is a good honorable mention for me because I love the relationship between Beverly and Picard, and this episode for me really is a great way to wrap it up because it brings all of it together by saying, oh wait, here they are, they're reading each other's minds, and now they actually have to have it out and really discuss how they truly feel for each other. I love that. I like the episode for an honorable mention. I like Masks as an honorable mention. I think that's good. Thine Own Self, as we've mentioned before, is a good honorable mention. We haven't talked about the episodes The Pegasus and Inheritance. These would be on my honorable mention list. These 2 episodes are, The Pegasus is the episode with Riker where he confronts his past with his former captain on the Pegasus. And you find out that the Pegasus was... I'm sorry, what?
Who's played by Terry O'Quinn, who would later feature in a lot of our favorite shows, such as The X-Files, and of course he is the Man in Black / what the hell is his name?
Locke on Lost.
Yeah, Locke on Lost. Even though we have probably many feelings about Lost, that's the subject of another podcast.
I love Lost. I will go to bat for it. So, funny thing about that episode is that it has that... I think it really brings Riker's character home by having to confront his past, and you see his arc over the entire series from being sort of... I don't even know how to describe it, but I think it kind of encompasses his arc really well, so that's why it's on my honorable mention list. We could mention the fact that this is the episode that the final episode of Enterprise takes place during, but whatever, we'll get to that. Inheritance is the episode where Data discovers his mother that he never knew he had, played by the what is her name? And the name is...
Nula Flanagan, isn't it?
Yes, Fionella Flanagan. I'm probably butchering that name, but yes, but she's a wonderful actress and plays his mother really well. And I just think it's a really nice, heartfelt episode that kind of solidifies Data's family history. I like Eye of the Beholder. It's the episode where Troy is investigating a crew member's suicide, and it turns out there was a murder plot on the Enterprise back when it was being constructed. It's not a great episode with the fact that it ends up all being kind of like, oh, it was all just a dream. But I still like it because, again, it's a Troy-centric episode. So anyway, my top 3, I think I will start with Parallels as my number 3. This episode, I'm a sucker for parallel universe storylines, and so I love the Worf parallel universes. I love the fact that it introduces the Worf-Troy romance that kind of has an arc in this season. Yeah, it kind of never goes anywhere, but I still think it's a really interesting dynamic to be introduced. It would have been cool if it developed in the movies, but it didn't, so whatever. And my number 2 is Lower Decks. I think this episode is a great change of pace for Star Trek because we get to focus on these not lower characters, but the ensign characters. And I like the way it wraps up the First Duty storyline, which is the episode where Crusher and his classmates, they screw up a dangerous flight pattern and kill a cadet, and they go on trial for it at the school, and they lie about it, and they suffer the consequences. And one of the characters is...
You like your Wesley Crusher to be a lying murderer, which he is.
Stop it! It was Tom Paris as a different character who was the murderer.
You're right, he was just complicit.
He was maybe an accessory, but we've already talked about First Duty, because that was part of our 5th season episode. And Kyle, Michael, continue.
Oh, we'll be covering it on the worst list.
Oh, jeez.
That'd be interesting because that might be on my best list. But anyway, yeah, I think the only thing about that episode that bothers me, and this is a really nitpicky thing, is that there's the character of Ben, who is the 10 forward waiter. It's so obvious that character should be Guinan. And in my opinion, if it were Guinan, it would make that episode a lot better. But it's still one of my favorites of the season. But it's just so obvious that it could literally be Guinan. You wouldn't have to change anything. You wouldn't have to change your dialogue. It just should have been Guinan. It would have been...
They couldn't get her. I don't think she...
I know, but that's what's so unfortunate. They couldn't get her to do it. So they just was like, oh, well, we'll just hire a random guy. And it's just like, no, it shouldn't be Guinan. But anyway, my favorite of the season...
I think they were filming the first Kirk parts of Generations, which Guinan was in. And I think she was busy filming that when Kirk saves her race.
So yeah.
I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they were trying to get all the stuff without the main Next Gen cast filmed as they could.
That makes sense. So my favorite episode of the season, maybe this will come as no surprise to anyone, my favorite episode is Dark Page. That is the episode where Lwaxana Troi she gets sick because she's using her telepathic abilities to negotiate a telepathic species entrance into the Federation, and she falls ill. When something happens, she falls ill, and Troy's like, well, why is this happening? And then she delves deep into Lwaxana's psyche in order to bring her out of like a coma, and she discovers that she's had a long-lost sister that tragically died by drowning when she was just a baby. And I think what this episode does is it really blames Lwaxana and how she dotes on Deanna and is so eccentric, because you start to realize, yeah, she came from tragedy. I mean, she lost her oldest daughter and her husband within a span of a very short period of time. Deanna is literally all she has left. So of course she's going to dote on her and be overbearing towards her and be, this eccentric, because she's got to love life for what she has left, and she has to appreciate life, and that's how she does it. So I think it really explains Lwaxana Troi, one of my favorite characters on the series, and I also love seeing Deanna actually get to use her psychological training to, it's like real psychological issues to deal with, like repressed memories and how do you deal with that. And it was just really neat to see that scene towards the end where she's literally talking to her mother and being like a real psychologist. So that's why it's my favorite.
And with all that good stuff with Lwaxana, they're showing her not just be a hindrance to society. She's helping that species, so she isn't just hitting the same note over and over again. It just, I don't know. You can really tell there's somebody taking time to write the character well and not as just a joke.
She's being an ambassador, and that's what she's supposed to be.
They did her dirty with that weird one with the mud baths and the things, and they did her wrong, and now they had to make up for it. So good job.
All right, so it's now time for my best list, and I do have honorable mentions. So here is the fun part. Every single one of mine has been mentioned at least at one point except one. We already did mention it, but it wasn't very positively mentioned, but I'll get to that. So in my honorable mentions, I have Dark Page. For all the same reasons that have been stated. It's a fine episode. It fills in a lot of backstory. It's story that is carried through to other pieces of this puzzle, such as Star Trek Picard. And you do get a lot of all of the... We're introducing all the secret family ones, and this is the last time we see this character ones. This hits really good notes all the way around for both of those things. I also have Inheritance. I put it on my honorable mention basically because it's an interesting mystery. I do think of all of Data's various family members. It's a little weak, but I also love her so much, and she's kind of what sells the episode in the end. And the fact that she turns out to be Twist, an android herself, is what makes it kind of interesting. So I have that on my honorable mention. I have Lower Decks on my honorable mentions because, the woman who plays Ensign Sito, soon to be Lieutenant Sito, is a very good actress. But what a really meaty story arc for her, even though her end is tragic. To follow it through this way from first duty and then seeing her try to atone and to do something that she does for the right reasons, but then it ends up being a poor outcome for her. So it's one of those things where there's hard luck no matter how hard you work kind of a business, I guess. But I also like the dynamic between these random characters that we never would have normally seen, and it did give most of the main cast a day off, I guess. I also put Preemptive Strike. I know, Sarah, you don't like Preemptive Strike because it's Roe, but it's the Ensign Roe episode, the penultimate. I know. I like it because it ends her character where you would have expected it to end, essentially. And by this time, I was just ready to be done, so maybe I just thought, that one wasn't so bad. Now, controversially, I have Masks at number 3. I don't know.
I'm fine with that.
I'm okay with that.
It's not because I think it's like the end all be all. It makes no top 10. It's just, if I had one complaint about it, it's that it ends too abruptly for my taste. It's like, basically it's all a metaphor for the sun and the moon. And I don't like that so much, but the mystery leading up to it is very interesting, and it's very spooky. There's spooky music. I don't know. I just enjoy it. It's a Data episode primarily. What can I tell you?
The props department, I bet, loved that episode.
I'm sure.
Because it's like, hey, we can make all these really cool new props for this episode. That's so cool. We could just would they take all the bridge and replace it with those cement blocks? And they make those little talismans and everything. I bet the props department just loved that episode.
I disagree. If I were them, I would have been like, the end, and we have to build a mythic temple and all this rock stuff.
Okay, if you worked for the Next Generation props department, tweet at CPU Podcast about whether or not this excited you. If nothing else, Masks is ultimately about Picard using his archaeological passions and knowledge to try to solve the mystery, and that's probably what I get caught up in, if anything. But I really had a hard time. Yeah, I really had a hard time picking 3 best ones out of this episode, and I could have interchanged that one with any of the 4 I just said. Number 2 for me is Attached. I think it's just brilliantly done, and it took far too long to get it. And it was everything I wanted. It was everything I wanted. They loved each other. It was finally confirmed. When I was a teenager, I just went flutter, 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 flutter. Hearts, hearts, hearts. And then finally, number 1 is All Good Things. All good things must come to an end, mon capitaine. But As series finales go, it's great. As the Star Trek series finale, to me, it will feature in one of my top 10 slots as a two-part in one slot. I love All Good Things. I think it's a fine episode. It's Q all over again. He's playing cat and mouse, and he seems kind of nasty, but to me, it's just a bookend to encounter at Farpoint with an understanding that they have between each other. Plus, we happen to know, because they're teasing out previews, that this might be the launching point for some story arc in Star Trek Picard.
I mean, technically it already was, because they established his brain abnormality.
That's true.
Which is an important plot in the first season.
That's true. I guess they're just hitting it on the nose with Q being in, if you haven't seen the teaser, season 2. So that's
one thing I will say about All Good Things is that, not that I haven't said enough about it already, the only reason it's not in my top 3 is because I'm considering it's like an episode apart from the entire season. And probably because I think of it so much as like a movie, to me, it's different from the TV series for whatever reason. So I think it is one of the best episodes of the season. I just was separating it from the season as a whole because it just felt like it was a movie. It didn't feel like it was an episode of episodic television. It felt like a sequel or something. I don't know. So to me, I separated it, so that's why it's not in my top 3 or honorable mentions.
Fair enough. All right, so those are our best and worst of season 7. Now, this is how we're going to do it, how we've done it in the past. Each member of our Star Trek 50 Plus series panel is going to go around the water cooler with we're going to start with the worst, and I'm going to start the worst, because I never go first, number 1, but I'll go last for the best, so that's how we'll do it. We'll bookend it. We'll make it like a mirror universe, okay? But also, what we do is just list it from whatever order you want, and if anyone needs a reminder as to what it is, go ahead and ask. But just give a little sentence about what it is, why you don't like it, and keep going. We'll go fast. Ready? Number 10.
Yes.
Okay, no thanks. Number 10 for me is Homeward. So this is one of the ones I just mentioned. The one with Worf's brother is at number 10. It was just so left field. Come on now. Number 9 is Devil's Due. Why is 9 Devil's Due? Now I forget.
That's one of the best ones.
Devil's Due is the episode where the
fake god.
Where she said she's the devil, basically.
Right, the fake god who's trying to take over the planet, and yeah.
Star Trek 5.
Yeah, it's basically Star Trek 5 rewritten for the next generation.
Yeah, but better. Got it.
No.
False.
No, it doesn't have any great lines like, why does God need a starship? Critical thinking.
Also, it's not fun. I know you like that one. I don't. It was my number 1 least favorite of that season. Okay. Number 8 for me, controversially, is Genesis. Bye-bye now. Number 7 is Aquiel. Aquiel, the one with Geordi and his journal girlfriend, poor actress, and the dog is an evil shapeshifter. Why did you do that to the dog? This is how I feel. Number 6 is Angel 1. This is the planet where it's a matriarchal society, and it's in season 1, and, you remember that one?
Yeah, but men are like the softer species, race.
Some kind of allegory that didn't really work very well, like so many of our season 1 episodes. Many of these are going to be in that general move. Number 5 is Up the Long Ladder, the fake Irish people that somehow were on another planet, and then they put it on their ship, and they were drinking a lot, lots of bad stereotypes. I take umbrage on behalf of the Irish people. Thank you.
What? If you don't like that episode, what do you do every year on St. Patrick's Day if you're not watching that?
Act like a
Just
normal
keep going.
person? Because days that end in Y don't need to be celebrated that way? Okay. Number 4 is Shades of Grey. I do believe that's the clip show from season 2.
Yes. That is voted by all the Star Trek websites as the absolute worst Star Trek of any series, the worst episode ever.
And I would have put it at number 1, but I felt like these next 3 were worse. Because at least the clip show was just an innocuous clip show. Number 3 is Man of the People. Troy gets mind violated. Number 2 is Violations. Troy gets mind violated. Number 1...
Is it the child? I feel like you're ramping up to Troy getting violated a lot.
Number 1 is Code of Honor, because
We're all just sighing with that one.
Talk about ones that just don't hold up.
Wait, that's the super racist one, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
So that one didn't have Troy getting mind violated, no. But, you know.
It had us getting mind violated.
Yes, exactly. So as you can see, there's a general theme to mine in those last 5, but for Shades of Grey. I picked all the ones that I felt were problematic in that top 5, well, top 6 really, and then the last 4 were just ones I have personal dislike for, generally speaking.
I can go next, but I might need some help because I'm not sure I remember what all of these are. I also, my order is very random. It was really hard for me to put some of these in order, so bear with me. Number 10, I said Sub Rosa.
The ghost.
You know what that is? Mm-hmm. The ghost sex thing. Number 9, The Outcast. I got nothing. I don't remember what it is.
We gotta look. Let's see if we can figure out what season it's from. It's
probably 6, maybe.
Season 6, you said?
I don't know.
Season 5. Season 5.
I should be looking up by name rather than scrolling through IMDb's.
It's season 5.
It's season 5.
This is the androgynous species where Riker.
Yep. Problematic for me. We can recall. You might have to go back, listeners, and listen to season 5, and I didn't like it. Number 8, I have Cost of Living. I don't know what it is.
Your notes indicate the season.
It's also season 5.
Cost of Living is the one that you keep complaining about, where Troy's on the holodeck with the mud baths and the crazy.
Yeah, he's watching Alexander.
Yes.
The higher, the fewer.
It's bad. Number 7 is Menage a Troy, where they get kidnapped by the Ferengi and everyone's naked, and I don't know. Number 6 is Man of the People. Is that the mind violations?
Yep. Mind violations.
Number 5 is The Perfect Mate, and that is with Famke Janssen.
Jean Grey.
Famke Janssen. Yeah.
Yep.
That was both simultaneously the best and worst pronunciation of that actress's name.
I knew Jensen was wrong, but I figured I should just go for it. And she's like bred to be the perfect mate, but like she's just annoying the whole time. Number 4 is Aquiel, where Geordi takes stalking to a next level, and
the dog is evil. That's so wrong.
It's just all weird. Number 3, I have Code of Honor. Again, is that the racist one with Yar and Number 2, I have Elementary Dear Data, because I really hate Pulaski in this one, and she just treats people terribly, and it's bad. And number 1, I have The Host.
The Host.
The Trill.
It's the Trill.
Luke Man?
Yep. Oh, yep. Beverly is forced. Well, I should say Riker is forced through no consent of his own to have intercourse with Beverly, and then they act like that's not weird later, and it's weird. Those are mine.
Wow.
I mean, on the list of Beverly sleeping with like her grandma's ghost lover, I guess it's not that weird.
I guess not. I bookended my list with those 2 sexual encounters by Beverly Crusher. I just think she deserves better. So let's hope for Picard season 2.
Nope, she's already said she's not in season 2. Maybe season 3, though.
I'll go next. So number 10, Fistful of Datas. I love the character of Data. That episode just falls so flat on every front. Like, I love Worf, and he's very unlikable in that. Terrible dad. The only one who comes out looking good is Troy.
Just to remind people, they're on the holodeck. It's the West.
Oh, yeah, they're on the holodeck, and Alexander wants to do a Western recreation with his dad. And Worf is just being a horrible father, not wanting any part in it, which I think they thought would be funny because he's curmudgeon-y, but it just, I don't know, it made him more unlikable than he should be. Number 9 is Masks for the same reason. I don't like Brett Spiner's kind of hammy performance in this episode. A lot of it, like, I can look past the silliness of, like, the ship turning into a temple and stuff, but I can't look past the corniness. 8 is First Duty. Wesley keeping that secret at the Academy, because I don't feel like any of the heroes I love in Star Trek would even remotely consider covering something up because, of their peers. Like, Kirk would never do that. Bones would never do that.
In the end.
I'm just saying, the fact that he was even conflicted about it in the society where they have such high morals, Wesley's a dirtbag. Number 7, Journey's End, the Wesley Crusher finale.
Yeah, we
scene
covered
gone.
that one.
But at least we all agree on that one. And the Native American stuff fell flat in that episode. The Shades of Grey, because it's the absolute horrible clip show. And then even the parts that aren't clips with Riker, his acting is way below par for what he normally brings to the show. Number 5, Last Outpost, just because it introduced the Ferengi, who I can't stand. I mean, I eventually came around to liking Quark, but he's the outlier. I hate all the Next Gen Ferengi episodes. Code of Honor, super racist, as we said. The Child, Troy being impregnated by the alien and all the men deciding what they're going to do and her not having a say in it and her being very casual about it. It hits the wrong chord in every way. Then Galaxy's Child, which is the super cringy Geordi and Leah Brahms episode where he's making all his horrible advances on her and she finds out about his hologram program, it's the absolute worst plotline, and Geordi just comes off horrible in it. Number 1, Sub Rosa, the ghost lover. It's just so ridiculously soapy. I can't watch it. I skip it every time. I never plan on watching it again.
Who's next?
You have rendered Kylie speechless.
I can't keep saying
I forgot about the Child. Good call on that piece of poop.
I mean, there's just so many of Troy being violated and just being okay with it. Like, it's hard.
That one at least ended okay. The Child said goodbye, thanks for the memories, and left.
And then we still have Nemesis. We still have her getting mind raped again.
I know, that's all. Well, and you didn't even list violations. That was the violating violator. So, anyway, who hasn't listed a worst?
That would be me. All right, so I think... Oh, actually, you know what? One episode on my bottom 10... 2 episodes in my bottom, 3 episodes in my bottom 10 have not been mentioned yet. So, number 10. My number 10, this might be a recency bias, but my number 10 is Interphase, which is the Jory LaForge episode that I fall asleep to every time this season. Like I said, it could be a recency bias, so I don't know. Number 9 is Up the Long Ladder, the Irish stereotype episode that just should not be Star Trek because of the fact that it's just, this is weird to have. Yeah, I don't like, no. Number 8 is the one we haven't mentioned. My number 8 is Justice, which is a season 1 episode in which Wesley Crusher and the whole entire crew goes on to that fantasy planet where the wardrobe department decided they had literally only 1 yard of fabric to use on 20 actors.
No undergarments. None. No underpants. Anywhere.
And tape.
And it's just like, yeah, it's just so utterly terrible, and definitely one of the worst of the series. Yeah, it's not a good story, and it's just cheesy, like the absolute sharpest cheese you could ever have on Star Trek. Number 7, Man of the People, because
Troy gets mind violated.
Exactly, and I love Troy. She's a wonderful character and a wonderful actress, Marina Sirtis. I would love to meet you and have dinner with you, not for any romantic reasons, but because I think you would be an interesting conversationalist. And that's why. Number 6, Journey's End. Again, possibly because of recency bias. I don't know. Number 5, Last Outpost, because that's the worst villain introduction on the series of introducing the villainous Ferengi, and they basically just threw out everything they introduced on that episode in regards to the Ferengi, because they're like, yeah, this is not good. Let's just redo all of this with these characters. Number 4, Violations. Again, Troy getting mind violated, and the episode that may have traumatized me when I was a child because I watched it over and over and over again because of my dad. And number 3, Code of Honor, because racism. Number 2 is the one that we have not mentioned and is up there for me. That is I believe it is season 4, maybe?
What's its
Well, I'm
name?
looking it up because I can't remember. No, it's season 5.
What's its name?
It's the name called The Game. It's the episode of season 5
Space
where
orgasms.
Wesley Crusher comes back after he's in the academy. It's like, oh, hey, I'm going to come home. And why is everyone on this ship acting weird? Because they're addicted to this drug that also happens to be a video game. Oh, yeah. And now I get to save the day again. Because Wesley Crusher. But it's just, if you want capital M message episode, I mean, this is not it, even when it is trying to be a message, because drugs are bad, but oh god, I just thinking of this, and it does Ashley Judd dirty because she plays Robin Leffler in the episode, and I like that character only because she features very heavily in the Star Trek Apocrypha novel series called, oh crap, now I'm forgetting the name of it. Oh no, my brain. I hate my brain sometimes. Anyway, she's in a book series, and I like her character because of that. And my number one is the cheesy clip show from season 2, Shades of Grey, because Star Trek should never do a clip show. The end.
Good job, Michael.
Did everybody get their worsts out?
No.
Okay, Nick, you still have to go?
Yeah.
I'm utterly surprised.
I don't know why you're surprised. Okay, most of mine have been mentioned, except for my number 10, which is the Vengeance Factor from season 3. There's these warring clans, and this one person is left because she lives forever for whatever reason, and is trying to kill everyone left in the clan that she hates, and Riker has to disintegrate her.
I almost put that on my list. That was like 11. So
This next one hasn't been mentioned either. Season 2, 8 of my 10 are from seasons 1 and 2, because when I look at most of the bad ones, at least it has the Star Trek Next Gen feel that I like of the cast. So season 2, A Matter of Honor. I think Riker goes to a Klingon ship, but I really hate I hate Wesley's taking the test to get in, and there's 4 of them, and 1 out of 4 can only get in. It just doesn't make any sense for canon.
but the part where Riker goes to the Klingon ship is good.
No, I disagree. I don't like the Klingons as much as most of you. The Child is my number 3. Angel 1 is next. Sorry, I said 3. Whatever. Angel 1. The next one that hasn't been mentioned is Too Short a Season. That's a season 1 episode where that guy is real old, but then he takes the medicine to make him young. I didn't care for it. And the next one's Violations. And then another one nobody's mentioned, The Icarus Factor. Riker has daddy issues. And then Michael's the only one who mentioned Justice, which I really don't care for, because we get so close to killing off Wesley and then we don't do it. No, that's not why I don't like it. That's not.
Man, Will Wheaton, if you're listening, first of all, hearts. Second of all, tweet at us.
That's not why I don't like it. I think that premise is terrible. Also, I don't know why they're even visiting that planet. They're pre-war.
We're very picky, choosy about that Prime Directive.
Yeah. And then I abhor clip shows. So Shades of Grey is number 2. I know there was a writer's strike. I don't care. It's not worth watching. It's the one I'm.
They would have been better off just being one episode. They would have been better off just being one episode short that season.
Agreed. And then the worst one is Code of Honor. It's just too, as Jonathan Frakes calls it, it's that racist piece of shit. Direct quote.
Yep, that one certainly never really held up. All right, well, there was a lot of agreement and some disagreement. That's to be expected. But now we'll end on a positive note, also with a few reflections, so don't run away right after the list. Let's go in the mirror order. So, Nick, you get to go first with your best list.
Okay, I kind of have some honorable mentions. I'll just say Encounter at Farpoint is my honorable mention. I do enjoy it as a pilot. But number 10, Half a Life. That's the one Luxana and Cogsworth.
David Ogden steers.
Number 9 is Conundrum. That's the one where they don't know who they are, and they have to figure it out. Worf thinks he might be caught.
All of your episodes are going to be the ensemble caper ones, aren't they?
Half a Life isn't, but the... So no. All Good Things is number 8. Darmok, Cause and Effect. Do you want me to explain these? I don't know.
Dharma, well, we should, because you're introducing them for the first time. See, that's the disadvantage of going first.
Gotcha. Darmok, it's very famous. Picard is transported to a planet with another captain that only speaks in metaphor, and they have to work together to understand each other.
The Enemy Mine episode.
Chaka, When the Walls Fell.
Kimba, his arms open. Whatever. Cause and Effect is the one where they're in that time loop, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
Kelsey Grammer, I think.
Kelsey Grammer at the end. Yep, they're in the time loop, and they have to figure out how to send a message to Data that he'll pick up and remember so that...
And threes come up in the poker game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Riker was right. Data killed them all on accident with his option. My next one is The Offspring. Data has a baby. Next, Measure of Man. We determine androids are people, or should have the same rights as any sentient life form. Next is Iborg. That's where we meet Hugh. a Borg gets an identity. Then after that, I put Best of Both Worlds as one episode. I don't think I have to just... Everyone knows that one. And then my favorite is Yesterday's Enterprise, where we see that alternate timeline. Yar comes back. The Enterprise C comes out of a time anomaly that plunges our present-day Enterprise or Federation into war with the Romulans? Yeah, and they have to send an Enterprise C back with Yar, and that's the second time Yar gets killed.
I'm not surprised.
Those weren't all ensemble ones.
They weren't. Thanks, Nick. Michael, you went before Nick.
I did, you're right. Okay, so my top 10. These are my 10 favorite episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation. When I was going through my list, I would literally just went through every episode on IMDb, and I was just like, I picked out 15 episodes that I love, that I would, if I never had to watch any other episodes of TNG, I picked out 15 episodes that I was just like, yep, that's great, that's great, that's great. So I'll start with my 5. These are honorable mentions that did not make my top 10. And that would be, in no particular order, All Good Things. And again, not because All Good Things is not an amazing episode and really amazing. I just consider it separate from the series because I don't know why, I just do. To me, it feels like a movie. It doesn't feel like television. So that's why it's separate. So Half a Life, because I love Lwaxana Troy. I love David Ogden Stiers in that episode. I think it's a really heartbreaking episode because it doesn't end up with a hand waving, everything's all right in the end. No, it isn't. He actually passes away and there's consequences to that. So it's actually kind of cool the way they did that. We haven't mentioned Captain's Holiday. That's one of my favorites in the fact because I love Vash. And Captain's Holiday is the episode where Picard goes on holiday and he goes to Risa and he just wants to sit down and read a book. But lo and behold, Vash comes along, who's an archaeologist pirate who's just also really attractive to him. And so they go on this really cool adventure together, and it's just a really cool episode. And I love Vash, and I wish there was more of her. The Offspring is one of my honorable mentions because it's, again, another heartbreaking episode because it's Data getting a child, and that child, again, dies, and it's just so sad. And being a father now, I understand that a lot better. So those, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and Darmok is an honorable mention because I think that episode does a great job with language and how that actually would affect astronauts and other spacefaring people because, yeah, alien species are going to speak different languages. So those are my 5 honorable mentions. Now going on to top 10. Number 10, Measure of a Man, because that is what Star Trek is all about. It's about exploring the human experience, and this episode does a fantastic job of exploring who Data is and how he is just as much of a viable person as anyone else. Number 9, we haven't mentioned it. I love this episode. It is a season 2 episode called Loud as a Whisper. That is the episode where they meet a deaf interpreter who is a really good, not interpreter, he's a deaf person who is an ambassador who is an expert negotiator and has 3 interpreters that interpret his thoughts because he can't speak. I love that episode. I think it does a great job of telling what it's like to be in that situation. So I love that one. Number 8, again, is a season 1 episode. It's Haven. It's the episode that introduces Lwaxana Troy, and I love that episode because it's such a great... Well, I just love Lwaxana, as I've said many times, so that's why I love it. Number 7 is the season 5 or 6 episode, The First Duty, which we've mentioned before. That's the episode of...
Season 5.
Is it 5 or 6? 5, okay. I think that's a great consequence episode. Number 6 we haven't mentioned is Relics, which is the episode where we get Scotty from the original series coming back to the Next Generation and the consequences of him having to live in this new world that he is somewhat obsolete in. And it's a great marriage between the original series and the Next Generation. My number 5 is Tapestry. This is a great Q episode. It's also the episode where Picard relives what he considers his greatest regret, which is getting stabbed by an alien and having his heart replaced by an artificial heart. And he relives this experience and changes it for what he thinks is going to be the better, but it turns out it isn't better because he would have, if he hadn't been stabbed by this alien, he would have squandered his Starfleet career as a low-level science officer. which I think is interesting. My number 4 is another Picard-centric episode we haven't mentioned. That is The Inner Light, which is the beautiful episode where he experiences an entire lifetime of the ancient civilization and gets that flute out of it. It's such a beautiful episode, a self-contained episode. And number 3 and 2 and 1 are all very similar and all very, I think, on brand. Number 3 is Yesterday's Enterprise, because it's just a great hour of television. Number 2, Cause and Effect, because I love time travel, time loop episodes. And number 1 we have not mentioned is Q Who, which is a season 2 episode in which we are introduced to the Borg. Q introduces the Star Trek and the Enterprise crew to the Borg. It's a great villain introduction. I like the episode because Q is not evil in the episode. He's a trickster, which is what he should be. He should not be an evil nemesis. He should just be like, oh, I'm gonna be a trickster and show you what you're actually doing out here. So that's my top 10.
Number 10 is Unification. I lumped parts 1 and 2 together. So that's the one, in the first part we get more Serac, and then in the second part we get Spock. The second part is kind of weaker, but when you put the two together, it's like a perfect episode, marrying the original series with the new series. Number 9, Elementary, My Dear Data. As a childhood fan of Sherlock Holmes and Star Trek, this one blew my mind. I think it holds up. It's still a fun episode. Measure of a Man, which is, as they said, Data standing trial. I feel like that's the episode where Data went from just kind of being like a token, oh, he's the robot crew member, when we really established the depths the character could have that would go on into the movies. 7 is Q Who, like Michael just said. The introduction to the Borg is scary because you still don't really see them. They're kind of like a masked threat. I love the fact that Q is still being kind of sinister in this episode, but then Picard has that last moment where everyone's like, why would Q do this? They're going to come to Earth now. And Picard's like, no, they were already coming to Earth. Q warned us. So I love that twist on that character, and that's when you finally realize, like, okay, there's more to Q than we're seeing. He's multi-leveled. Number 6 is Serac. That's, other than Kirk, Serac is like my ultimate favorite Star Trek character. There's a reason he's in every iteration, pretty much. And this is a great swan song for him, seeing the end of his life and seeing, where he is this far into the future. Number 5, Relics, for the same reason. We get Scotty in the future and dealing with it and dealing with old age, and just seeing that character interact with these new ones who we've grown to love is just, it's beautiful. And I get emotional every time he's on that bridge hologram. Then number 4, Brothers, because it introduced Lore, who other than Khan is my favorite Star Trek villain, and it really showed Brent Spiner's range, which is why I hate Mask so much, because it's the opposite. Number 3, Yesterday's Enterprise. It's just a brilliant time travel, altering of time story, and the way they brought Yar back in a clever way that it works really well. It's like perfect Star Trek. And then number 2 is Best of Both Worlds Part 2. It's still great, but it's not quite as good as the first part, which is why that's my number 1. The Cutest of Borg is awesome.
I just wanted to slightly correct you. Lore is introduced in Data Lore.
Oh, but that's the episode that like really has their main interaction. But anything with Lore is on my list.
Brothers also introduces the personification of Dr. Noonien Soong.
Yes, the episode where they're both dealing with their father and...
Yes. All right. Not a surprising list out of Kyle. Sarah.
I felt bad. I didn't have any Worf episodes on there, and like I love him, but these episodes are all so great.
That is surprising. I actually have Worf ones on mine. That's okay. Sarah.
All right. My number 10 is Timescape. I have no idea what it is. I'm sorry. I drew these from my lists, and I had it ranked really high.
Just
this is the only one I don't know, I promise.
Is that the one with 2 Picards, but one's passed out?
No.
This is the one where Picard, Data, LaForge, and Troy are on a runabout, and they watch the Enterprise frozen, and they have to deal with it, and there's a war.
Yeah, that's real good.
And the Romulans, yeah. Thank you. See, when you say them, I know, but then I'm like, I don't know why I liked it. Okay, number 9, I have Half a Life.
That's right.
That's with, what's his name? Winchester, right? Isn't that one?
Mm-hmm.
Number 8, Captain's Holiday. Just an enjoyable romp. Fun time. Number 7 is Clues. I just looked this up. It's a season 4 episode where they lose 30 seconds of time, but it's really more than that. And they have to go back, and there's this alien race that made Data promise, and they have to redo it. And
Data's a big liar.
He's a liar to help. Lies are good. Number 6, The Offspring. Data has a baby. Number 5, Measure of a Man. Is Data a person? Yes. Number 4, All Good Things, ... Number 3, Cause and Effect. That's the one with the clues and the poker and the 3 and the pips.
Captain Fraser.
Yes. Number 2, The Inner Light, because I just think it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautifully written, beautiful piece of television. And number 1 is Yesterday's Enterprise. I think it is, I don't know, maybe my top 10 for all of the Star Trek series, which I hope we don't have to do, because that would be real hard.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do that, but fair enough.
It's the only episode that really, like, you can say the name of it and I know instantly what it is, what happens. I remember when Nick showed it to me, how I felt and how amazed I was at it, and how I'm a total dunce at temporal mechanics and quantum leaping, and yet I seem to be drawn to those storylines very much. So,
You're not a dunce at quantum leaping, and that's not quite quantum leaping, but that's the subject of the Quantum Leap podcast, which you will be moderating, so it all just
all
makes sense.
things time travel get me in a pickle.
Sure.
Except for Back to the Future, because that's not really... Yeah.
Okay, well, aside from 2, all of mine have been mentioned. And I did not cheat on ties except at one spot. So there's no... This is it. So at number 10, maybe somewhat controversially, is Yesterday's Enterprise. You all liked it better than me. I enjoy it a whole lot. That season is so strong. For me, it was just, how do I pick? What do I pick? It is. It's a great episode. It's time travel at its very, very best, and the fact that they are able to mine it repetitively throughout future seasons of the series and future series is how pivotal that episode is. I don't like it as much from a feels perspective as the next ones, and so I go forward. Number 9 is Darmok. I've always liked that one. I'm with Nick on that one. I'm with Michael on that one. The use of language is very creative. The fact that it's got the late great Paul Winfield as the other character that Captain Picard,
or Captain Tyrell.
Yeah, that Captain Picard must try to communicate with. It's one of those iconic episodes that has managed to transcend the brand of the Next Generation. People know about that one, even if they don't. And I love it. Number 8 is All Good Things, ... as Sarah calls it. It's a great finale. Number 7 is Encounter at Farpoint. For me, the premiere and the finale are 2 of the best in all of television, and certainly in all of Star Trek. It's just the way I feel. Here's the cheaty one, because I did not know how to break this apart. They're 2 separate episodes, but one is the beginning and one is the middle, and then there's the end, but I didn't put it on because I don't think the end lands as well. It's Sins of the Father and Redemption 1. This is Worf's story arc, first with the Duras family just basically saying that his father is dishonorable, did all the horrible things at Kittimer, and then Redemption is trying to get back his father's honor and bring back the honor of his house and his brother's honor as well. As Klingon episodes go, I think these are the creme de la creme of the Klingon episodes. You get a lot of Worf and Picard's relationship in both of them because of Picard's role in Klingon. I can't remember what it's called. Chadit?
Chadit!
Yeah, and I just think it's really well done. And I don't even normally just fall all over myself for the Klingons, but that one is, those 2 episodes for me are classic quintessential Star Trek. At number 5, I have Iborg Hugh, because what a unique concept that also has managed to transcend. It comes back again in Next Generation and in future series, including Star Trek Picard, and I really love everything about it. Number 4, I did not break these apart, is the Unifications, Part 1 and 2. Kyle and I were the ones who liked these particularly. He likes them probably more than I do, but Sarek and Spock, I mean, you can't sneeze at that. This was such a huge event at the time. It still resonates that way for me. It's got all of the little Easter eggs, particularly in the Spock half, where they're making a lot of nods to the original series and to Captain Kirk and to how Data and Spock are basically the same but different in their roles and their respective crews, and it's just really, really well written. Number 3 is The Offspring. I have this higher. It really brings out the feels in me to watch Data's journey, trying to have lull and make her a viable being. And also Brent Spiner is just so nuanced and wonderful in this one. Number 2 for me is The Measure of a Man. It's the courtroom drama of Star Trek, and it's just so good. I'm surprised that it wasn't ranked higher for some of you. For me, it's like, this is what Star Trek is all about, is The Measure of a Man. But I cannot, you have to guess probably what my number 1 is, and I did put them together because to me they're 2 parts of the same movie, and that's The Best of Both Worlds. I can't tell you just how riveting that was. I've already said it in our previous episodes. Those were so important to me, and they still hold up so well, and I still get chills when I watch them, and I could just watch them all by themselves. I don't need to watch all the Star Trek up to it and all of it past. I can just pick those out and enjoy it and know exactly where I'm going with it because it's so good, so well directed, and Patrick Stewart is so good in it.
I mean, and you can watch those 2 and then go right into First Contact, and it just feels like one cohesive, epic series.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, we've presented our lists. Of course, we don't try for a consensus because we'd be here for forever and nobody wants that. But now I have to ask you a couple of book-ending roundabout. I mean, we're closing the book on The Next Generation because our next series will be Deep Space Nine, and that'll be Nick's problem, not mine. So he's so excited, and so am I. So answer me this: how do you feel about Star Trek: The Next Generation? Having done this whole rewatch, would you say that it's aged well? Did it end when it was supposed to? Give me your summation on what you think about The Next Generation. Closing comments.
I think that Star Trek: The Next Generation is one of the seminal television series of the latter half of the 20th century. I think it came at the exact right time in the culture to, it was like the late 80s and 90s, which was a more optimistic, I think, time period. I don't know, maybe you remember it better, Kylie, than the rest of us, so I don't know if you agree with that, but...
Oh, you want me to answer that? Yeah, I mean, I think we were on an upswing. This was, we were heading towards the end of, communism in Eastern Europe and in Russia, and the 80s generally were winding down. The 90s were generally pretty good. Maybe not the earliest of the 90s so much, but definitely an upswing as the presidents changed and so forth. So I'd say that's pretty true.
Okay, yeah. So, and I just think if you look at what television has become since 1994, you can kind of see a lot changing after this. So I don't know if The Next Generation helped bring that about or not. But I don't know, I feel like it's possible that this could have very much be a part of the great television series of the latter half of the 20th century. I really do think so. So, yeah, it has aged pretty well, I think. Yeah, certain aspects of the series are a little but overall, this is a series that I think anyone who is a Star Trek fan, or anyone who isn't a Star Trek fan, can come back to and say, yeah, this is a good television. This is good, old-fashioned television.
I would agree with that. I think you could even, from just looking at it as a TV show, you can draw direct lines from Star Trek people who worked on it to other shows like X-Files, Supernatural, Breaking Bad, and Better Call Saul. That line exists. I do think it's aged well because I think it's about humanity and hope, and I think it's worth people still watching. I think even with as much as I'm enjoying new Trek, and as much as you'll hear me love Deep Space Nine and Voyager as we move on, I think Next Gen is the last time we spend more time with the utopia that humanity is to give us something to shoot for as we go out into space, whereas the other series, they put us in the middle of things that test what the best humanity can be, with the war in Deep Space Nine and being lost in Voyager. I think Next Gen is one of the most important Star Trek shows, and I think it's a really well-made television show that I think it's worth people should take the time to watch. They could skip about 10 to 20 of the episodes, but...
We told them which ones to skip, see, so you're welcome.
Yeah, don't skip all the ones on some people's bottom 10.
Sub Rosa, skip it.
No!
I'll say rewatching this and then kind of re-falling in love with a lot of the side characters and other characters I didn't quite appreciate before. It makes me sad that they only got 2 decent movies with these crews that really did Crusher and Troy, and it just feels like we could have gotten so much more. The great movies we got with the original series people and everything, there's so much. I mean, you can always go back and rewatch the show, but it just feels like they missed an opportunity, and it just makes me more sad than I used to kind of forgive all 4 of them just because I love Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner, but when you see all these other great episodes, it really kind of weakens trying to watch those movies.
Sarah, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, I can't remember the question at this point. What was it do I think that it holds up?
Yeah, do you have any final thoughts? Do you think it holds up?
Well, the beauty about these shows is that they're science fiction fantasy. I mean, there's nothing really. I think it holds up because it is what you think it is. It's important to different people for different reasons. It's interesting to see some of the technology that we now have, touch screen stuff and
Tablets,
yeah, communicators. Woo. But I think it's it's my second favorite Star Trek show. So I mean, I think it's well written, well acted, well produced. I think people should watch it if they like science fiction stuff, and even if they don't, I mean, it's part of the pop culture lexicon now, so maybe you should just watch a couple eps and check it out. I don't know.
I would just add that considering the fact that bringing back or reviving the franchise through this series led to the creation of several more sequels, prequels, spin-offs, movies, reboots. I mean, the original series is what started it, and it's what everybody wants, but it wasn't until the Next Generation got launched that the possibilities on the franchise were really realized as we've come to know.
I would say Wrath of Khan.
Wrath of Khan contributes, but I'm talking about...
I'm just saying, it was the huge pop culture explosion.
It was.
And it kind of led to the Next Generation.
It did, but what I'm talking about is everything that came after the Next Generation. I'm not undermining or discrediting the original series or its affiliated films. What I'm saying is that if it wasn't for the Next Generation, we probably wouldn't have gotten Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Picard, blah, 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 because it just kind of had... And it's also influenced, I mean, you brought up, Nick, the X-Files, Supernatural, the Vince Gilligan era, but it's also influenced things we wouldn't have the Orville. Seth MacFarlane wouldn't even have a damn show if it
Futurama!
Futurama is another one. There
are... the original.
Well, either. He gets both of them in there. Family Guy does a whole ode to Star Trek, both Star Treks. I mean, it clearly leaves an indelible imprint, not only as part of the larger franchise, but as its own thing.
I mean, just look at the references to it on Big Bang Theory.
Exactly.
Yeah, they referenced the original series, but nowhere near as much as
the
Next Gen.
Exactly, and that's because of the way it's realized its own life and what it becomes all by itself. Sure, it's a spin-off or a revival even in some ways, but it's its own thing, and it's really stood the test of time. It is my favorite Star Trek. I've rewatched them all at least once, except for Enterprise. We're fixing that.
You just don't have faith of the heart.
I guess not.
That's a good one, Kyle.
Whatever. But anyway, it's still my favorite. I would still rewatch it again a few years down the line because I enjoy it so much. I love all these actors. The cast is so much fun in real life. Everything is just so great about it, and it just gets better. And I would recommend it to anybody, really. I mean, you don't have to just be a sci-fi fan. I try to convince people, look, Star Trek isn't just about Star Trek, yo. It's not about just the trek through the stars. It's what they encounter on the journey. It's the reverberations and allegories and what they're telling us about life. It's the hope that Nick talked about. And also, I probably should make a callback to our Star Trek versus Star Wars appearance at Comic-Con when Nick made such an impassioned plea about Star Trek generally. I think it's just embodied by the Next Generation as well. So
Yeah. I mean, like, look at the reaction when they announced Picard, just to see the impact this show has had. Like, I mean, they announced Discovery and people were like, oh, new Star Trek, okay, that's kind of interesting. But when the trailers and commercials for Picard came out, it was like this roar of the... Like, even people who aren't, like, hardcore Star Trek fans were getting excited because everybody kind of just loves this character. And then, like, when you find out that, like, Riker and Troy were in it, the reactions were just through the roof.
It's true. It's true. And I lost my crap when I figured out that this was going to be a thing. And I love that character so much, but all of these characters so much. So I think Star Trek as a franchise obviously has a great legacy, and that's why we're talking about it. But the Next Generation particularly just has quite an indelible footprint on pop culture all by itself. At this time, is there anything you want to say that we haven't already said somewhere along the line in these last 7 episodes about Star Trek The Next Generation?
I don't know if this fits your question. One thing I will say is that as sort of a way to help us transition into where we're going next, is I liked this. The last 2 seasons are a very good setup for Deep Space Nine and where we go from there. I think the crossover episodes really work. So I guess bookending from what you're saying, Kylie, yes, I mean, this series as a whole really makes me excited at that point in time when I was a kid, and also now, having watching everything, it makes me excited to see where the franchise goes from here. Because not only does it such a great show overall in and of itself, but it also lays groundwork for so many great possibilities of science fiction, as well as good storytelling in general.
Get ready for your list of your top 173 episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
We don't have that kind of time!
I'm the moderator now.
Not yet, man. I haven't given you the con.
Oh, I stand relieved.
Whoa. This is why Nick and I are friends. We can do the whole lingo. Just go like this. I don't know how to transition that into the ending, Nick. Thanks a lot. Seriously.
You could say live long and prosper and then let it go.
Let it go?
Let it go?
Frozen?
I'm not making like Elsa.
I don't know. Just whatever. I don't know. Trying to help you guys out.
I know, we can't leave it here. So we'll just say, sincerely from us, the Star Trek 50 Plus series panel, to you, gentle listener, thanks for listening to the Star Trek The Next Generation episodes of this giganimous series that we're doing. And I'd like to thank, I hope nobody gets too offended if I start assigning you ranks, Lieutenant Commander Kyle, Dr. Sarah, Commander Nick, Counselor Michael, and me for talking about Star Trek The Next Generation for all 7 seasons. And because we've had such wonderful discussions about my favorite Star Trek series, it's now time to roll the credits. Couch Potatoes Unite! Was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kels Rezmer. Kels played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole shebang was engineered by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us, give us stars, provide comments, or review us wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Amazon are just a few of the places you can find us, but we're also on YouTube. We have our website, and we're now on Patreon at patreon.com/couchpotatoesunite. If you really love us, pledge your support by becoming one of our United Couch Potatoes as we grow our little sofa-populated corner of the world. Otherwise, feel free to tell us how we're doing, what we should add, subtract, keep, or toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions for shows we might consider, contact us at our website where we have a guest book, by email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, our Facebook, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, our Patreon, or wherever you get your podcasts. Though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time, and always have new episodes coming down the pipe. Just listen to our intros. If you miss old episodes or want to know in general what shows we cover, just search for us. Find us wherever you do searchable things on the internet. Don't forget that exclamation point, or contact us via our website, our email, our social media accounts, and our Patreon to stay up on all the new events and episodes by our humble little podcast, Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation point. Until the next time, all the Trek series of the past, with the exception of the new ones, and I guess the animated series, and maybe this has changed since I've written this, I'm not sure, but they're available on just about every streamer you can think of, or you can subscribe to Paramount Plus where everything is. That is not a pitch for Paramount Plus, because I just can't track all the stuff, but just, that's where you can find the stuff. In the meantime, our Star Trek 50 Plus series panel will next reconvene to discuss the first and premiere season of Deep Space Nine, when who is in charge of the con of moderation finally changes, in part 12 of this Looking Back series. So until next time, until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned!
Bye-bye.